What's up? I'm B, and welcome to my channel where we debunk harmful personal development and religious norms and have some occasional live streams for current events. If you are interested in those, I would highly recommend subscribing and turning on your notification bell to make sure you get notified, because I don't always give a ton of warnings. Sometimes I just pop up, and if you're here, you're here. And if not, the replays always stay up anyway. Today we are going to be taking a look at a topic that is a lot to talk about and is one that I'm going to get highly passionate about. Now, if you've been watching me for a while, obviously you know a little bit about my story and my background, but if not, just kind of a brief overview. I consider myself to be a Christian. I was raised in a Christian home. Both of my parents were pastors growing up. I'm non-denominational Christian, and I've had a very long and personal journey with confronting my own beliefs and things that were told to me as a kid by different religious leaders, by different pastors, by the Bible, and doing digging on what I feel is right from a religious standpoint and also from a human standpoint. And since January of this year, have had custody of 2 kids and my family. It's physical custody. It's a long and complicated and messy thing, not only to be involved in the foster care system, but especially when it's when you're taking care of kids whose parents are your family members. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I am sure you can see why that's messy. And so throughout the past 9 months, actually having them, and from March of 2020 until we got them in January, we dealt with a lot of legal things there. So for me, that's a lot of experience, but I know that it is extremely limited and our case is very unique. So I think that gives me kind of a different and unique perspective, not one that's entirely different from anybody in the entire world. I'm sure there's lots of people who can understand where I'm coming from, but I think that gives me a bit of a different perspective than maybe a lot of Christians would have. Today we're tackling abortion and the new laws passed in Texas, and just wanting to address some of my opinions on that. We're going to go ahead and get started with an article from the Associated Press. Obviously, I'm sure you've heard about this law. You've heard certain things about it. I have as well, but I'm definitely not an expert, so I want to read it directly from a news source so that way we can get kind of a concise description of what's happening. The Supreme Court allowing a new Texas law that bans most abortions is the biggest curb to the constitutional right to an abortion in decades, and Republicans in other states are already considering similar measures. The law prohibits abortions once medical professionals can detect cardiac activity, usually around 6 weeks before some women know they're pregnant. Courts have blocked other states from imposing similar restrictions, but Texas's law differs significantly because it leaves enforcement up to private citizens through civil lawsuits instead of criminal prosecutors. So, what does this Texas law do? It allows any private citizen to sue Texas abortion providers who violate the law, as well as anyone who aids or abets a woman getting the procedure. Abortion patients themselves, however, cannot be sued. The law does not make exceptions for rape or incest. The person bringing the lawsuit, who does not have to have a connection to the woman getting the abortion, is entitled to at least $10,000 in damages if they prevail in court. Texas Right to Life, the state's largest anti-abortion group, launched a website to receive tips about suspected violations and says it has attorneys ready to bring lawsuits. The new Texas law could affect thousands of women seeking abortions, though precise estimates are difficult. In 2020, Texas facilities performed about 54,000 abortions on residents. More than 45,000 of those occurred at 8 weeks of pregnancy or less. Some of those abortions could still have been legal under the new law if they occurred before cardiac activity was detected. So this law was put into play. Obviously, people are still talking about it, debating it. It's going before a court of appeals. Who knows what will happen? But this is a very scary thing. So before we get into my thoughts on this, I want to just kind of get this argument out of the way. I think very few people would be cavalier about an abortion. Obviously, I've seen it, but I think in most cases, like from me seeing people talk about it and people that I know who have had abortions or thought about having them or just talked about the subject in general, it's not just like a fun Tuesday afternoon activity. Nobody, very few people, I guess I will say, would be excited to have an abortion. It's a heavy topic. It's a medical procedure. It's going to take a lot out of you. There's recovery time. Very few people are sitting here excited thinking about the thought of terminating a pregnancy. When people are like, "Oh, you just want to be running around murdering babies like it's nothing." No, it's a very serious decision, and using hyperbolic language like that and making all these conflations and being like, "Oh, well, you just love killing babies." That's not a helpful or productive conversation to have, because that's really not a side that most people are arguing. Now, I get that there are many people who are not religious that are pro life, and they take this stance for various different reasons. You don't have to be Christian to be pro life, you don't have to be religious to be pro life. But I want to talk to the people who are religious, who are pro life, and have a chat with you. Is it fair for you to say, well, my religion doesn't promote abortions, and so I don't believe in abortion, so you can't have one? What if somebody was part of a religion that mandated something that you didn't agree with, and they said, well, because I'm part of this religion, you have to follow me? You wouldn't like that. You cannot hold somebody to the same belief system that you hold yourself to when they're not part of it. If somebody is a brother or a sister in Christ and you know you guys are on the same level and you see them making a decision that violates the moral code that you both believe in, and you go to them in good faith and you want to talk to them about it, that is one thing. But saying because I believe something, everybody else should have to follow me, is unacceptable. That's not okay. You cannot force other people to believe the things that you believe. It's mind-boggling to me why anybody would want to force someone to have a child that they don't want to have. Because I get it, like the thought of a life ending is very sad. And I will come out and say my belief loud and clear. My belief on abortion is that I could never have one. I couldn't. For me, it would not be the right decision. It's not what I would believe to be right in my heart of hearts. But I'm also one person, and I am free to have my beliefs as I see fit. I cannot imagine the fear of people in a variety of situations. And I'm trying not to give like an example of somebody who was assaulted and is carrying their rapist baby, or somebody who was a victim of incest and is carrying their rapist baby. Like, I'm trying not to bring that up because I've seen that that is harmful and that further stigmatizes abortions. And, you know, there are plenty of people who are married couples who don't want kids and they get pregnant and they decide to have it, an abortion. And like, again, that is their choice to act as they see fit. I do think that it's prudent to have a reasonable timeline before a child is developed to a certain extent, to where, you know, we cut it off and we say, okay, no, at this point it's cruel. I do think that those laws are important, but 6 weeks, a lot of people will not know that they are pregnant at that point. To think about 6 weeks, and to think about somebody being forced to carry and bring a child into the world that they don't want. You're like holding a woman's body captive for your own belief system that they may or may not even subscribe to. So again, I could never see myself having one, but that doesn't mean I'm going to deny anybody else the right to do with their body as they see fit. I wanted to share this TikTok that I think is just
commented on my last video that it was probably going to be taken down. So thank you for that. I have terrible judgment and I don't want to get, again, trigger warning. This is about pregnancy, loss, abortion, and shitty parents. But when arguing with pro-lifers, there's no room for nuance there, and it's really frustrating. So when I say a woman has the right to choose, they respond with, oh, so you're okay with murder. My response today is, oh, so you're okay with torture and suffering. Imagine a heroin addict who has no intention of getting clean saying, no, I don't want this baby, please don't give me this baby, and someone handing her an infant and saying, next time keep your legs closed. Imagine handing a young couple a baby who will never speak or eat or breathe on her own, and saying, next time, keep your legs closed. And by the way, we're going to be sending you bills for tens of thousands of dollars for the rest of your life. Imagine a woman trapped in an abusive marriage with 2 children, no money, and nowhere to go, and her saying, please don't give me this baby, he will hurt this baby, and then handing her an infant and saying, next time, keep your legs closed. Imagine ripping a baby out of a 12-year-old girl's arms and saying, next time, keep your legs closed. Imagine a family of 4 giving the dad an infant and then forcing him to bury his wife. Imagine looking at a woman in the eye who's saying, please don't give me this baby. I cannot afford to feed this baby. I can't even feed myself. Handing her an infant and saying, don't breed him if you can't feed him. Imagine taking a baby boy and handing him over to a sex trafficker. If you're shaking your head and saying, no, these are rare, please go look up statistics for poverty, addiction, and human trafficking in this country, especially in the state of Texas. I know some of the people who support the heartbeat bill have good intentions, but I really need you to think about this because I don't think that you're giving the gift that you think you are. And let me save you some trouble here. Oh, so you like murdering babies, huh?
I could not have said that better myself. I know that religious people, they come from this side of, well, babies are precious and they are a gift from God. They are innocent creatures. They didn't do anything. Yeah, I get it. It's so sad, but thinking about like, well, just have the baby and then it can get adopted. Or just have the baby and maybe you'll change your mind. Do you know how many people are living in poverty? How many people just straight up don't want kids? I can tell you right now, kids are a massive game changer. They are expensive. They require so much time and effort and energy. And how fair is it to bring a child into the world that you have no intention of raising? That you have no intention of taking care of and loving and parenting the way that a child should be parented and loved and taken care of. And it's like, oh, there's so many couples that would love to have a baby. Yeah, sure. Maybe you will find great adoptive parents. Maybe you will. But adoption's expensive. And adoption is bigoted. And do you know how many people are still outraged at the thought of gay couples adopting? Like, it's a lot harder for them. It's a lot harder for gay people to adopt or for single people to adopt because it goes against the stigma of like, oh, the nuclear family. And so there are people who would love to adopt and have a family who have a harder time, or there's people who would love to do that and it's super expensive. And so maybe they go the foster care route. But guess what? The foster care route, the foster care system is focused on we don't want to terminate parents' rights. We want to keep the parents' rights because that's a little bit easier. So finding a child that is free for adoption that fits with your family is a bit of a task. It's a bit of a challenge. And maybe you do think you find that kid. That kid's a perfect fit. And real life story that I have heard from somebody who was involved in handling the aftermath was a child bounced and bounced and bounced and bounced and bounced for about 5 years, got adopted, spent a year with his forever family, who then abandoned him at a CPS office and walked away. They said, no, we're actually not his forever parents. And that kid did get adopted again. But do you know how terrified he was? Do you know how closed off he was? Because he said, well, the last people said that they were for my forever family. Then they just left me. It is cruel to bring a child into the world that you have no intention of raising, and it is unimaginably twisted to make someone do that against their will. And you can't just say, oh, well, they should have kept their legs closed. Because even if we're ignoring like assault, incest, abusive partners, all this stuff, we're just saying a normal couple, no toxic dynamics, just they don't want to have kids. They shouldn't be allowed to have sex. Like, I'm trying to think of that because, you know, yes, birth control, condoms, yes, there are ways of like managing your risk of getting pregnant, but those don't always work. So you're saying that a couple should have kept their legs closed, or a wife should have kept her legs closed if she didn't want to have a kid because she can't have an intimate relationship with her partner because she might get pregnant, and if she does, you're going to make her keep it. I just really, logically, it does not make sense to me. You're just gonna expect people to not have sex. It's a very natural human thing. And yes, one of the consequences, quote unquote, of having sex can be getting pregnant. But what else do we police like this? But anyway, back to the foster care argument. The foster care system is broken. If you're coming at it from a religious standpoint and you're saying, don't terminate that pregnancy, there are so many people who would love to have that baby. According to datacenter.kidscount.org, as of data collected in 2020, there are 47,913 children ages 0 through 17 in foster care in Texas alone. And I get it, not all of them are from parents who got pregnant and couldn't get an abortion or found out too late, didn't want one but were forced to have a child anyway. They're not all that case. There's a lot of parents who go into pregnancy and carrying it full term with the best of intentions, but they have their own demons and they're fighting their own battles and they're just not fit to raise children. But then those children are in foster care. And so banning abortions at 6 weeks, can you imagine how much that number is going to grow? I'm terrified. I am terrified at that thought. And again, this is a very personal thing for me, having dealt with the foster care system, because I will say that Monks and Beans are, I feel so lucky. They were in a foster home before they came to us. And since they've come to us, I have developed a really great relationship with their former foster family. They send them presents for their birthdays, for 4th of July. They just check in. They pray for us. They ask how we are doing. And I feel so incredibly grateful that that is the family that they were with. But do you know how many nights I spent when we were waiting to get approved? Because, again, it's from the state that they were into the state that we were. There's an ICPC process that you have to go to, and it took from March to December for us to get approved. And they were in foster care that entire time. Do you know how many nights I stayed up being terrified for them, not knowing what their foster family was like, not knowing if they were being taken care of, if they were being loved, if they were being hurt, if they were being abused? And again, fortunately, I know that they weren't. Like, their former foster mom is just, she's incredible, and she has been an amazing support for me, but not every kid is that lucky. In June of this year, over 400 kids were placed in unlicensed foster care facilities in Texas. And part of that is due to a lot of kind of crackdown and reform on foster care facilities and foster homes that were not following the rules, that were being abusive, that were harming kids. And so that reform is really great, but it's also meant that there are kids who are sleeping in motels, on floors at CPS offices, in pews at churches. Like, kids are displaced and they don't know where they're going to sleep that night, where they're going to shower, if they're going to have a toothbrush available, where they're going to eat, when they're going to eat. Yes, the reform is happening, and that's good, and hopefully good will come from that, but that doesn't take away from the current crisis. And of course, COVID has just completely obliterated resources for CPS, DHS, stuff like that, and I understand that, and I'm empathetic to it, but I think this is always going to be an issue, and one that is only going to get worse if regulations like this stick. If it sticks, if you are paying people or guaranteeing them at least $10,000 in damages to report somebody having an abortion after 6 weeks, if you're giving people incentive to tattle, basically, you are turning citizens into bounty hunters for $10,000. And for what? For what? How does this benefit anybody? Tell me how it benefits people who are existing right now. You force someone to have a child that they do not want or are unwilling to take care of. How does this help any of them? I've had this conversation with somebody who their mom considered getting an abortion with them, and they were like, so you think I shouldn't have been born? And I'm like, no, no, I am not saying that, but I'm saying your mom had the right to consider that, and I'm so glad that you're here. I love you, but your mom had the right to consider that because it was her life, and it is such a sad thing. I don't ever want to come off as if I'm being cavalier about it, or I'm just saying like, meh, they don't matter. They're not technically children yet. Like, they're not born yet, so they don't matter. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying I don't understand how this benefits anyone, how this doesn't create more problems, more loss, more pain, more suffering for people on an individual scale and for the system as a whole. Now, I want to close this out by referencing a quote from a pastor that talks about how the unborn are a very convenient group to advocate for because they don't ask for anything from you. They don't need anything. They don't want your money. They don't have bad habits or bad choices. They don't steal from you. They're not incarcerated. They don't have a dark and checkered past. They're really easy to advocate for. But if you're pro-life, you should be pro-life in all aspects. And there are some studies that would suggest that Christians foster and adopt at a higher rate than most adults do in the United States, which is great. But I would also contend that they probably have an easier time doing that. There's a big adoption culture within the church. There's religious programs that help out with that. Christian couples are most likely heterosexual and probably have a better chance of getting approved for foster care and adoption. I know there's been a lot of questions on our journey. What are our religious practices? Do we go to church? How long have we been going there? Do we have community ties? Like all this stuff. And so I would say, while the interest is, according to these studies, which I will link below, you can look at them for yourself, more Christians have seriously considered fostering and adopting than the general public in America. They also have successfully done it more often, but again, they probably consider it more because it is part of the culture, and they do it more because it's easier for them to get licensed or to get approved. I want to echo the words from that TikTok. You are not giving the people the gift that you think you are. You are handing them something that is going to be very painful. And if you are pro-life and that is a hill that you are standing tall and proud on, it's time to step up for everybody, for every life. It's time to donate to women's shelters. It's time to find your local foster care resources and ask, what do you need? What can I donate to you? How can I help? Maybe it's time to get licensed to foster. Maybe it's time to volunteer with inmates. Maybe it's time to go to a nursing home and hang out, play games, volunteer. The unborn are a very convenient group to advocate for because it doesn't really take any effort from you. You can just say, well, babies are precious, so you have to have it. And it's your fault that you're pregnant, and you're a terrible person if you abort it. If you terminate your pregnancy, you're awful. It's really easy for you to sit from a distance and say that. How are you going to get involved? How are you going to make a difference? How are you going to put your feet on the sand? How are you going to get your head in the game? You going to step into the ring? Are you? Or are you just going to sit from afar and point fingers? Just something to consider. With all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. This has been a really, really, really tough one. This is not a fun topic to talk about, but I think it's important, and I want to hear what you think about all of this down below. Leave me a comment, and while you're doing that, if you would consider liking this video or subscribing to my channel, that would be incredible. And if you're subscribed already, thank you. I'm so appreciative of you, and I love being able to just sit here, hang out with you, and talk about whatever. Thank you so much for watching. Please be kind to people, and I'll see you in the next one.